to start with the land acknowledgement. I'm in the land of the the Mi'kmaq people who are in Nova Scotia, Canada. It has never been ceded to the colonial British or French for that matter, and have that ongoing relationship between nations. And that's something that's really in the news, of course, right now with the Soviet invasion of the Ukraine. And it's something that is an ongoing reckoning. And in Canada, there's a lot going on with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I know there's a little bit of that starting in the United States around Indian residential schools. And so sometimes it's, this land acknowledgement, I've had this up here for a long time now. And sometimes we kind of just go, oh, yeah, yeah, and go on. But other times it's so helpful to just pause and acknowledge that if we're in North America, we're on land that was colonized by the British, French, Spanish, and that there were people here and families and cultures and communities that were affected by that, and that we're all part of that now. All right. So this is the last of our series directly working with Deb Dana's Anchored. And I know many of you have her book or you've got That Sounds True, Befriending Your Nervous System, and that you're working with that. All of those, one of the really brilliant things about Deb Dana is that she's really good at coming up with exercises that we could do that go way below or way deeper than our conscious mind. So that's one of the things that I would really encourage people to get in touch with, and to, if you're reading her work or in That Sounds True, it's an audio as well, that she has so many really innovative ways. And a lot of them we've been doing in here as well. And of course, a lot of them I didn't have enough time to really cover all of them. So I'd still really encourage everybody to get her books, or watch the video of the interview that I did with her on radicalrecoverysummit.com. And a lot of what we're doing here is learning how to regulate ourselves so that we can be present and enjoy our lives a lot more. One of the ways that we do that is by cultivating moments of awe. This is Peggy's Cove, actually, which some of you have heard about. It's a very well known place in Nova Scotia. And I'm sure we've all seen the light coming from clouds at different times as well. And when we are in a place of beauty, we often just naturally become silent and we take it in. And I've been out to Peggy's Cove many times. And if we get a little a ways from some of the crowd, there's always places where you can kind of stand or sit in the rocks and just kind of absorb the natural beauty of the place. And there are other, there's kids jumping around and having a good time, and there's all kinds of things going on there. But just to allow ourselves to have moments of awe. So sometimes when I get really busy and I think, well, I need to get this done or that done, I'll take a short walk instead of a longer walk, or I won't sit in the forest in the middle of the walk like I often do. We just get busy and we forget that these moments where we stop and we're still and we just take it in are a big part of what makes life worth living. And it also makes us happiest and happiest. So there's a lot of good reasons for it as well. So I wanted to take a moment here on this slide and just to take in some of the beauty, the admiration that we have for people. There's a woman conducting an orchestra with an expression of joy and exultation maybe on her face. Simone Biles, the amazing gymnast who can do things with her body that are unbelievable, and how hard she has worked and how honest she was last year when she decided to not participate in one of the Olympic events. A mother and a child, a sailboat, the Northern Lights. Let's take a few minutes now to notice what comes in as we're looking at these images or as you close your eyes and remember ones of your own. Notice your body and notice your breath. Let your body relax. And notice how our response might be very still when we look at the sailboat one or think of times of quiet. There's a different kind of energy when we think of exaltation and joy or of the power of Simone Biles and the work that she did to get there. And the love showing on that baby's face. And because we're working a lot right now with the polyvagal system, notice which of those parts seems to be more activated. So, are you in ventral vagal, that trust and connect? And then, is there a bit more energy, like there might be with the woman conducting the orchestra or Simone Biles doing her gymnast routine? What's the subtle difference compared to standing in stillness watching something beautiful like the Northern Lights or the warmth of the heart looking at that baby's face? And there might be thoughts that are coming in as well, or memories. I lived in the Yukon for a couple of years in northern Canada, and when I would come home from my shift as a bartender, I would often pull the car over and just look at the northern lights, which were amazing. That's one of the memories that came forward. We all have those memories. These things stimulate other things in us. And it might be a thinking of, I wish that I had someone who loved me the way that baby loves its mom. It's not necessarily all joy. Just notice what's here. I'm going to take a few deep breaths again. So, one of the really interesting things that Deb Dana said is that small moments of awe add up and they predict future well being. So, the connection between what we think the future is going to be and the amount of joy and awe and wonder that we cultivate in our daily life, it's a direct connection. And I think that's really interesting. And it's something that happens in our neural networks. It's not something that we kind of think positive thoughts about. If we just pause and notice, then that emerges. And she had talked before about how compassion, especially self compassion, is an emergent property of ventral vagal. And we know from our own experience that when we're in a fight, flight, or freeze state, we don't have any self compassion at all. And often we feel very disconnected from ourselves and from other people. So these moments of how can we come into ventral vagal, and this is such a powerful way to feel more alive, more compassionate, and to work with our nervous system's pull towards connection. So, one of the things the primitive brain is very certain about is that it needs to protect us from danger, it needs to keep our physical body alive. It doesn't care about happiness very much. And though, it also has a pull towards connection because that actually increases our survival. So, if we can be connected within a family unit, evolution wise, that was what kept us alive. We would have died if we'd been ostracized or left behind somehow. So, this is something that's really built into our nervous system and that we could work with. And then to get into gratitude, and we're going to do a little bit of a resting here again, is that gratitude is an emotion that exists in relationships with others and that it wants us to deepen. It's a pull where we want to deepen the relationship. So, let's take a moment here now to bring to mind receiving goodness from other human beings. Let's get specific. It could be something kind of more general, but let's bring something specific in. So, somebody who went out of their way to be good to you in some way, who put some effort into it. And it might be they smiled at you and as you walked by on the path or something, or it could be something really big where someone let you stay with them for a while if you needed a place to stay, or where they listen and really connect with you. So if you want, you could put your hand on your heart, but just bring your attention into your body and focus for a moment on goodness that you've received from other people. And notice that there's some thought element here, and really use your brain to bring it to life. So the sounds, the visuals, the smells, the tastes, the touch. Let yourself become kind of immersed in it. And when we are receiving a gift like that, notice if there is that kind of heartfelt urge to offer something in return, and not at all in the sense of evening the score. Well, I don't deserve to be treated so well, so I'm going to kind of give that back. Not like that. And that might be there. That's very common for that to be there. Just to let that kind of go a little bit to the side and notice in your own heart, is there a reciprocity? Is there a wishing to offer a gift of goodness in return? And notice what it feels like in your body, in your energetic body, in your heart center. Really focusing in on receiving goodness and offering goodness. And it doesn't have to be perfect to count. Something might come up, a memory of somebody that was offering goodness, and then maybe later on the relationship kind of fell apart or something. But we could still focus on the heartfelt offering of goodness. Let the rest move to the back for a moment. And for securely attached people, this might be something that you notice a lot. And for people who are not as trusting of other people, it might be something that we don't really take in that much. Maybe we're in a bit of a freeze and somebody does something for us and we hardly even notice. And then we miss out on that reciprocity as well. When we don't notice what's coming in, we might not be moved to offer some goodness in return. So let's sit with the nuances. It's not a simple thing. And keeping a toe at least in ventral vagal, that trust and connect. If you're feeling any kind of hard heartedness towards yourself, see if you could allow that to soften. Just taking a moment to experience the pleasure and the joy of receiving and of wanting to offer back. And then coming to the next slide, Mr. Rogers is a familiar face. And this quote of his, look for the helpers. You'll always find people who are helping. And that was very popular right after the Boston Marathon bombings. And and it's really true in a lot of other situations. We can all bring to mind many situations where firefighters, run into a burning building, or medical staff, doctors, nurses, custodians, aides, all of those people kept going into the hospital to save lives, even though there was such a danger with COVID. So there's this feeling of some people really seem to go into that and really always want to be engaged in helping. And so this elevation is this inspiring feeling that we can experience as well when we see these acts of human goodness and kindness, courage, and compassion. When COVID first started, some of the doctors that I know were making plans to all live in one house together and so the rest of their families could be safe. And as it turned out in Nova Scotia, COVID never got as dominant as that, so they didn't need to do that. But just to look at, how do we feel about people who make those kinds of sacrifices? And it can be something so small. It can be the reaching out to someone who has suffered a loss, even though we don't feel like it, and opening our hearts as much as we can. So in this case, this elevation that Deb Dana is talking about, our ventral and our sympathetic circuits are both activated. So we're both touched by the experience, and then we're moved to offer an act of kindness. So compassion, as I spoke about a moment ago, we have to have at least some of our awareness in ventral vagal. One of the ways to think about ventral vagal is what it's not. So it's not fight or flight, and it's not freeze. So it's a state of calm, trust, connect. And one of the other words that we might use for that is presence, that we do a mindfulness practice. We're aware of what our responses are. So if you're aware that you have a sympathetic response to something, you're kind of going into an energetic arousal, sympathetic arousal, then that's different from being lost in that. So you might be feeling, for instance, a feeling of anger is a simple one to work with. So a feeling of anger arises in your body and in your mind. You have a fight response. And if you're really carried away with that, you're probably just going to say that thing or do that thing. If you can stay a bit grounded in awareness, your experience then will be, I notice that feelings of anger are arising. I notice that I have an urge. to say something harsh or nasty or whatever it is. And I'm also able to regulate my nervous system. So it might be that I say, I'm pretty close to the edge here. I can't talk right now. I know it takes 20 minutes for the cortisol and adrenaline to settle. So I'm going to go for a walk. I'll come back. Are you okay to talk about that later? So it could be that we state it, or it could be that we just take those deep breaths and we stay very grounded in our body. So it's the awareness of what's happening that allows us to stay in the more emotionally regulated state. So if we're in a dorsal or a freeze response, for instance, we're not even going to probably take in the action that somebody offered to us. And so we're going to lose that opportunity to have that reciprocity. So when you think about that in terms of ventral vagal, for me, when I would, lots of different, lots of different experiences come to mind. Something would happen that was really good, and I would just be kind of non-responsive, and then it would take some time, like maybe a few minutes, maybe longer. But I know one time somebody said, "So, did you hear what I just said? I just said that I'm going to be staying and not going now. Are you not happy about that?" And it kind of woke me up out of the freeze, and I'm like, "Oh, actually, I am really happy about that. I'm delighted that you're not having to leave." And so, to just as we notice what's happening in our system, and I didn't notice it until he asked that question. And so there's lots of ways that this can happen, but one of them is that we can cultivate this feeling of, I want to really be present for this, whatever it is that my experience is. So we're touched by the experience and we let it in, and we also notice. And I'm also a little bit in fight, I'm a little bit in freeze. We notice those as well. So this compassion that's only available to us if we're at least partly in ventral vagal, that state of trust and connect, is something that we're moved to do. So, one of the things that Deb talked about is to set an intention to cultivate compassion. And that's something we could cultivate a lot of the time in yoga with the yamas and niyamas. One of them is santosha, contentment. And so, I, for a long time, had an intention and a practice of cultivating contentment. And so it kind of fits in now with the modern brain science of, actually, we develop new neural networks. There's all kinds of really wonderful things happen when we cultivate this. So let's pause again for a moment now and just think about, do you want to set an intention to cultivate compassion, which compassion is all of this, what we've just been talking about, this feeling of connection, of that inspiration to do something good, to offer an act of kindness. It's empathy in action. Are you moved to cultivate that on a regular basis? And if so, what would that look like? Let's take a couple of minutes to sit with that. That's something we could carry forward with us. A very simple way to do that would just be to set an intention to notice, and not necessarily to move into an action, but just to notice. So let's work a little bit more with what might get in the way of compassion. The autonomic nervous system is our common denominator with all the other people in the world. And so if we're feeling compassionate, if we're not in a state of fight, flight, or freeze, we can see that someone's struggling and we don't blame them for it or shame them for it. And we can work with this internally as well. So oftentimes when we're struggling, we feel like we're bad or broken. So, in order to have compassion for someone else, we need to have at least a little bit of elevation out of that state ourselves. So, other people, and bring to mind somebody specific or a group of people specific as we're working with this. And someone who's stuck in an adaptive survival state. So, it might be, that family person who believes a little bit in the COVID hoax, or so whoever it is that comes to mind. And then just I'll just kind of say these and let them drop in. Just like me, this person experiences times of connection and wants connection, and times of protection where they've moved back, they're not really available for connection. So just like me, this person experiences times of connection and times of protection. And stay present with your body and your breath. If something's getting too intense, open your eyes, tap on your forehead, put it in a frame on the other side of the room, use those tools. And just like me, this person responds to cues of safety and cues of danger. And this is really evident when we're looking at the divisiveness and what media outlets people are watching. So if you're watching something that has a lot of danger and adrenaline rush and fear, which a lot of our media does, there aren't going to be a lot of cues of safety there. So the nervous system will be in a red alert state a lot of the time. So just like me, this person responds to cues of safety and responds to cues of danger. And just like me, this person can feel dangerous. Sometimes we feel dangerous to others if they sense that we're about to explode or something, or if we're really disconnected. And just like me, they can connect and disappear, or they can be warm and welcoming. So the autonomic nervous system is the common denominator. Just like me, this person can disconnect and disappear, or they can be warm and welcoming. Notice your body, stay grounded in the moment. We're always staying grounded in ventral. And one of the ways that we do that is we could hold our own hands. You could notice your feet on the floor. You could do some breathing. Stay connected. So let's move on to not an in depth, but a kind of a quick look at forgiveness. And this is something that is really a cause of suffering for many people. And I wanted to bring in this nervous system element of it. So, again, this is Deb's polyvagal ladder. We got dorsal vagal, I can't cope. Sympathetic, I'm in danger. I need to run or fight back. And then the ventral, where we feel connected. So, what she's talking about around forgiveness is that when we feel unforgiving, it is because our nervous system holds on to the experience with an activated sympathetic survival state. And that as we remember the person, it brings the biology alive. So let's do a 2 or 3 minute little practice on this. So as you're thinking about that, maybe someone comes to mind right away. And if this is a 10 out of 10, you might not want to work on this now. You might want to come back to it, or you could start the process. It usually takes a little bit longer, but I wanted to share this in terms of giving ourselves a kind of a template to work with. So, first of all, bring to mind somebody that you're having a hard time forgiving. They've done something that's clearly wrong, clearly hurtful. It might be someone from the past or recent past, present. Somebody's done something that's wrong. And notice what's happening in your body. So, oftentimes it's a cue of danger. Something has happened that's been harmful, and we tighten up. We might go into a little bit of a freeze. But bring yourself up out of freeze if you're in freeze and see if you can just notice what is the energy of this in your body. Bring the person to mind. And it might be the person who cut you off in traffic. So it might not be personal, or it might be something else. But just to bring somebody into mind, let yourself kind of scan through the different things and then settle on one. And notice what's happening in your body as you're doing that. So when we use the example of a driver, there's a danger there. Somebody's done something that's potentially going to harm us. And so our body goes into some kind of a sympathetic arousal, a fight or flight. It's accompanied with a higher heart rate. We might feel our heart pounding if it's really scary. It's accompanied by thoughts in the mind. So notice whatever it is that you're working with. Notice the arousal, the cues of danger. There's something here. And a lot of what we have trouble with is personal, it's social. So maybe it's that person who took credit for something we did at work, or that person who cut us out of something. They were being a mean person, whatever it might be that you're working with. And so we're doing this combination of bringing it to mind in a vivid enough way that we're feeling some kind of a response and staying grounded in awareness. So stay aware of what your response is and let yourself breathe. Let your body relax. Remember that right now in this moment, there's nobody here being mean. There's nobody that's dangerous. We're just doing a practice. And there will be thoughts. I can never forgive that. That was too much. And notice what that feels like. You could do some tapping here if the thoughts are pretty intense. Put the words in a frame on the other side of the room or somebody's face. So stay very connected. Stay in ventral vagal and notice what's happening in your body. And from this state of connection, see if you can just keep working with this for another moment or two. I'm noticing these are the thoughts. I'm seeing this person's face. And I'm aware that that's what's happening to me. And notice the level of threat as you're staying grounded in your body. Maybe you're holding your own hand. Notice that you can be very present with yourself and with your reactions and responses. And then let's come back to the group. So, beaming benevolence. And this is another one of Deb Dana's wonderful exercises. So, I'll just kind of say these and you can close your eyes if you want, or you can read them. It's totally up to you. But feel the place where your energy of kindness is born. So, bring to mind something, an experience of kindness to help you kind of touch into that. And just pause there for a moment and savor that state. So, this is a state of ventral vagal, of trust, connection, and it might be a kindness that you were thinking about earlier in the meeting as well. And then imagine using this energy for healing. So it's through the active, ongoing, intentional offering of our ventral vagal energy that we are a beacon of kindness, generosity, goodness, compassion, friendship, common humanity. This is where we connect on a human level. And so this is where we'll pause for a minute or so each. So create an intention to beam benevolence to yourself and to your inner child. And then just kind of sit with that in your heart center, wherever it might be. Let yourself beam benevolence and let yourself receive that. Really take that in your whole nervous system and your body and the energy. Beam benevolence to yourself. And then beam that benevolence to a friend, somebody you love, and to all beings everywhere. So, if we were to beam that out into the world right now, there is a lot of suffering, and we could just hold in our hearts this benevolent intention, connection. Notice your breath, stay in your body in this moment. And it might not look like much, it might be a simple kind of sitting in stillness and sending that out in some way to other beings, however it is that that shows up. And then if we were to bring it in a little closer and beam benevolence to everyone who's here.